Good to everybody. Welcome back. Hope you had a terrific Shavuos. Chag Matan Torah Seinu. Hope you had a chance to look at the Mar Makomos we gave out regarding what is going to be one of the most important questions and that is going to result regarding the reopening of our shuls. Of course, do we have to make up the Parshios that were missed? Do we not have to make up the Parshios that we missed? By the time we get back to shul, we will have missed close to 20 Parshios. So the question that is brought to our table, of course, is do we have to make up these parshios? Is it an obligation? Is it voluntary? Is it a requirement? Is it not a requirement? What is the story and what will we do here in shul? So truth be told, although this question seems to be very foreign and certainly is not a question that we have dealt with in our lifetime, the truth is that there's an enormous amount of halachic rabbinic material dealing with this question dating back to the Rishonim. There were often times throughout Jewish history, as you'll see, throughout these centuries, where shul did not meet, whether it was because of inclement weather, whether it was because of particular issues that took place in the course of shul, whether it was because of in-house fighting or there was exterior issues that took place. Regardless, this was a question that existed throughout history. The issue that did not exist is the amount of time that we're dealing with. In none of the tshuvas that we will refer to today do you ever see anything about missing an entire Sefer of Chumash, missing all of Sefer Vayikra, half of Sefer Shmos, half of Sefer Bamidbar. But this question as to what's referred to in the Ramah, Bitlu Shabbos Achas, the Layning for a Shabbos was nullified, didn't exist. That is a question that has enormous amount of halachic material, and let's start from the top with the tshuva of the Or Zarua. The Or Zarua, Yitzchak ben Moshe of Vienna, who flourished in the 1200s, one of the great Rishonim, important Rishonim for Psak Halach and Minhagim for Ashkenaz, and the Or Zarua recounts the following incident that took place in Cologne, France, and I quote you from the Or Zarua directly. Maise Shahaya B'Kilonia. The story took place in Cologne, in France. There was a person who was some level excommunicated from the shul. He was unable to be there. He came to shul, and they were unable to continue the davening and the laning as a result of him being there. Therefore, Kriyas Torahs Kol Hoyom Kshigia Shabbos Abba, the entire laning for that Shabbos was canceled, and when the next Shabbos came along, Tziva Reb Eliezer Reb Shimon Zatzal lahaschil b'Parshas Emor laKohanim v'lekros v'gam b'Har Sinai haru likaros b'Osher Shabbos, and the charge and the psak halacha that was given by Reb Eliezer Reb Shimon Zatzal was that you had to make up the previous week's parsha. So Parshas Emor, the laning didn't take place. They came back to shul Parshas Bahar. They were ready to lane, and the Rav Paskin they have to go back and read Parshas Emor as well as Parshas Bahar. And now listen to the words of the Or Zarua, which are going to be critical to our discussion. Lefi, Kimimos Moshe Rabbeinu, from the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, Niskan Likros HaTorah b'Parshios. There was an enactment, an establishment, to read Parshas HaShavua. And to complete the 54 Parshios every single year. To teach the nation, the Jewish people, the mitzvos, the laws, the chukim, the statutes. Don't say that since you missed this week's parsha, therefore, there it is, null and void, and you can't make it up. Says the Or Zarua, Lefikein Teva beParshios Likros Parshazu b'Shabbazu v'Zu b'Parshazu. Never is it as specific that you have to read Parshas Emor this week, Parshas Bahar this specific week. If you missed one of the Parshios, make sure you make it up. Make it up. Parshios. Says the Or Zarua, this is the way the Parshios were established, and he brings a raya to something that occurred today. When Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, you don't read the laning of Shabbos. Today we didn't read Parshas Naso, but rather we push off Parshas Naso to next week. So therefore, says the Or Zarua, you see that you don't specifically have to read the Parsha of the week that Shabbos. There are times when it does get bumped off. So if it's Yom Tov and it gets bumped off to the next Shabbos, or if there's a situation where the shul couldn't meet, and therefore you have to read it another Shabbos. So the psak of the Or Zarua, which is very clear, is that there's an establishment to read Parshios HaShavua, and even though it's missed in a particular week, whatever the reason is, if it's b'mezid, if it's b'shogeg, if it's b'ones, whether it's extenuating circumstances or not extenuating circumstances, if it's on purpose that they missed, or whether it's accidental that they missed, either way, according to the Zarua, the halach is that you have to read all the Parshios HaShavua. Bereishis Shmos, Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim, every single year, from Parshas Bereishis through Parshas Zos HaBracha, when you get to Simchas Torah, you have had to finish all the Parshios HaShavua. So whatever you missed, if it's one Parsha or if it's one Sefer, you gotta make it up. Thus, what would emerge according to the Psak of the Or Zarua is that in our circumstance, whatever we missed, starting back in Parshas Kisisa, you'd have to read Kisisa, Vayakel, Pekudei, all of Sefer Vayikra, and we would have to pick up wherever we're ready to reopen with the Parsha that we left with and make it up from that point. That's the Psak of the Or Zarua. If you take a look in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Kuf Lamed Hey, the second Ramah in all of Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah, the Ramah paskins like the Or Zarua, and I quote, "In bitlu Shabbos Echad Kriyas HaParsha B'tzibur." If 1 week the Layning was unable to be read, L'Shabbos Haba, in the following week, Korin Oso Parsha Ima Parsha Hashaycha Oso Shabbos. You can read the Parsha of the week along with the Parsha that you missed. And in parentheses here, the Ramah quotes the Or Zarua. What would emerge from the simple reading of the Ramah, especially now that we've read the Or Zarua inside, is that the Ramah paskins like the Or Zarua. And therefore, if you missed the Shabbos, or in our circumstance, if you missed 15 Shabbosim, you gotta make up all the Parshios HaShavua. It would seem like it's an open and shut case. You have an Or Zarua, the Ramah paskins like the Or Zarua, case closed, you make up all the Parshios that were missed. However, the Bira Hagron Shulchan Aruch changes the entire sugya. And the Vilna Gaon in his commentary on this Ramah says 5 words. And he says, Kimo shekasav b'tfila, ta v'lo hispala. And what the Gra is referring to is that the halacha of tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah, making up missed Parshios, is mimicked or patterned after Tov v'lo hispalo, the halach of tashlumin for tefillah. And just like you miss a tefillah, you make it up in the next tefillah, in a subsequent tefillah. If I miss Shachris, I'll daven Mincha twice. If I miss Mincha, I'll daven 2 Ma'arivs. If I miss Ma'ariv, I'll daven 2 Shmon Esheres for Shachris. The same thing should be true when it comes to tashlumim for tefillah, would be true for tashlumim for Kriyas HaTorah. The question is, how tight and how deep is this connection between tashlumim for tefillah and tashlumim for Kriyas HaTorah? If you take a look at the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Vilna Gaon and explains that it's a very, very significant comparison that the Vilna Gaon is making. And there are 3 practical differences that the Mishnah Berurah notes, both in the Mishnah Berurah as well as in the Be'er Halacha and in the Sha'ar Tzion in the beginning of Siman Kuf Lamed Hey Sif Beis. The first, when it comes to tefillah, tashlumim, making up a missed tefillah, it's only if it was done b'shogeg, accidentally. If I was so busy, I forgot Shachris, I forgot Mincha, I forgot Ma'ariv, I have to go back and make up the tefillah. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah in the Be'er Halacha, the same thing would be true when it comes to tashlumim for Kriyas HaTorah. If I forgot Kriyas HaTorah accidentally, just like when it comes to tefillah, I make up a tefillah that was missed accidentally, the same thing is true when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah that was missed. If it was missed accidentally, I would again make it up. Point number 1. Point number 2, the Mishnah Berurah says, let's say I missed a lot of tefillahs. If I missed Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, for a few days, for a few weeks, well, how many tefillos do I make up? We're familiar with the Halach and the Gemara and Paskin and Shulchan Aruch. You only make up the previous tefillah. So if I forgot Shachris, I'll make up at Mincha for Shachris. If I forgot Mincha, I'll make up at Ma'ariv for Mincha. But I'm not going to make up previous tefillah. So even if I miss days and weeks of tefillah, when I'm ready to daven for the first time, I wasn't feeling well, I was out of sorts, even though I missed weeks or even months of tefillah, I'm only going to make up the previous tefillah. And thus, paskins the Mishnah Berurah, even if I missed weeks and months of Kriyas HaTorah. If Kriyas HaTorah, according to the Vilna Gaon, is patterned after tashlumim for tefillah, I'll only have to make up 1 tefillah. Therefore, according to the Vilna Gaon, what emerges, the Mishnah Berurah says, if you missed an entire Sefer of Chumash, all of Sefer Vayikra, I missed part of Sefer Shmos, and I'm going to miss Parshas Bamidbar, says the Vilna Gaon, it's tashlumin. And just like when it comes to tefillah, I only have to make up the previous week, the same thing is true when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, I only have to make up the previous week. So if we go back to Shul, this coming week, Amir Tzashem, let's say it's Parshas Naso, I'd only have to make up Parshas Bamidbar, and I would miss all of Sefer Vayikra, and we left off in Parshas Kisisa, there's nothing else to do. According to the Vilna Gaon, that is what you would have to do. There's a third nafkamina. We all know when it comes to tefillah, tashlumim for tefillah, if I missed a tefillah, the rule is I make up that tefillah at the next tefillah. So for example, let's say I missed mincha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to daven Marav, and that tefillah of Marav is the tefillah that I daven with the community, with the tzibur, with myself. I daven Marav. The next tefillah, that's the makeup for mincha. Therefore, what would emerge here is the same thing. When I get to shul this coming week, I'll first lay in the Parshios HaShavua, if it's Parshas Naso, and then I'll make up Parshas Bamidbar, the previous week's Parsha. If it's patterned after Tashlumim for Tefillah, just like when it comes to Tefillah, first I daven the present Tefillah, and only then the makeup, the same thing is true when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah. First I'll lay in the prominent Parshas HaShavua, and then the makeup. Interestingly enough, here the Mishnah Berurah says you don't do that, but rather you lane in order. And the Noda B'Yehuda explains in a tshuva that the reason for that is Toras Hashem Tamima. Even though it's true, according to the Vilna Gaon, that we're mimicking, carbon copying, patterning Tashlumim for Kriyas HaTorah after Tashlumim for Tefillah, when it comes to this, we're not going to take it to the extent when it comes to Tefillah, but rather we're going to look at it as Toras Hashem Tamima, and we're going to lane it in order. What emerges is that we have a very basic machlokas between the Vilna Gaon and the Or Zarua. According to the Or Zarua, the way to look at a missed Kriyas HaTorah is that you're missing a critical puzzle piece. And if I only lane 53 Parshios and not 54, or if I only lane 40 Parshios and not 54, I'm missing Toras Hashem Tamima. And never ever whatsoever should you reach Simchas Torah missing any Parsha. And therefore, according to the Or Zarua, it doesn't make a difference if it was Shogeg or if it was Mazin. It doesn't make a difference if it was 1 week or 2 weeks. Whatever the situation is, whatever the case may be, you always are required to go back and read all of the Parshios HaShavua. However, according to the Vilna Gaon, it's a totally different understanding of a missed Parsha. Parshas HaShavua can only be mashlim the previous Parsha. Just like when it comes to Tefillah, I'll only make up the previous Tefillah. So too here when it comes to a missed Parsha, Parshas HaShavua, the Tashlumim for Kriyas HaTorah is only going to be the previous week. So in our circumstance, it's a massive nafkamina between the Or Zarua and the Vilna Gaon. According to the Or Zarua, I have to go back to Parshas Kisisa and make up all the way straight until the Parsha that we get back to Shul. According to the Vilna Gaon, all you're going to have to do is make up the previous week's Parsha and then read the present Parshas HaShavua. That's the machlokas between the Or Zarua and the Vilna Gaon. Thus, we begin with two basic opinions. Either you make up all of the Parshios like the Or Zarua, or you make up the previous week's Parsha only, and you'll have missed all of the other Parshios of the year, and that is all that has to be done. But there's a second layer to this issue, and that's a tshuva of the Maharam Mintz. Maharam Mintz, tshuva sefer in Siman Pei Hey, also lived in the 1400s. He has a case where a fight broke out in the shul toward the end of Layning, and they were unable to finish the Parshas HaShavua. And the Maharam Mintz, if you see the tshuva inside, for all intents purposes, seems to paskin like the Gra, that the only thing you have to make up is the previous week's Parsha. But not because of the logic of the Vilna Gaon, that Kriyas HaTorah is patterned after Tefillah in the world of Tashlumim, but the language of the Maharam Mintz is La'olam lo matzinu sheyikru shlosha Parshios b'Shabbos. We never find any time throughout the year, annually, that we read 3 Parshios. We only read a double Parsha. Tazria Metzora, Achres Mos Kedoshim, Vayakel Pekude, but never ever do we read 3 Parshios. Now it's true you take out 3 Sifrei Torah from time to time throughout the year, but you never read and lane 3 full Parshios. So therefore, says the Maharam Mintz, the only thing you're required to do is to read the present Parsha and then the previous week's Parsha. So it seems that the Maharam Mintz has a similar logic and a similar halacha to the Vilna Gaon, but for a different reason. However, the Maharam Mintz says 2 chidushim lahalacha, which veers extremely from the Vilna Gaon. The first thing that the Maharam Mintz says is as follows: if there's ever a double parsha, if you missed a double parsha, if you missed Hazriya Mitzorah, if you missed Vayakel Pekuda, if you missed Bahar B'chukosai, you're never going to read the following week 3 Parshios. So if it's ever a double parsha, or if the present week is a double parsha, you're never going to lane 3 Parshios. So if it turned out, like it was in many shuls which opened up last week, Parshas Bamidbar, out of this city, then you would have to read Bahar B'chukosai and Bamidbar. According to the Maram Mintz, you would not do that. You would only lane Parshas Bamidbar, because Olam Lamatzinu Shikru Gimel Parshas. You never find that you read 3 Parshas. Chiddush number 1 of the Maram Mintz. Chiddush number 2 of the Maram Mintz is if you ever miss the last parsha in a sefer, you're never going to make that up with the first parsha of the new sefer. So if you miss Parshas Vayechi, you miss Parshas Pekude, you miss Parshas B'chukosai, or whatever parsha that was lost at the end of a sefer, you're never going to connect it to the beginning of the new book that you're about to read. And the Maram Mintz explains that the svara is that you're going to connect the end of the sefer with the beginning of the sefer with one aliyah, and one person is going to read the end of Parshios to the beginning of Shmos, or the end of Shmos to the beginning of Vayikra, or the end of Vayikra to the beginning of Bamidbar. It's not nice, it's not covered to the Sefer Torah, and it's not appropriate to do that, and therefore that's not something that should be done. And again, this was halacha l'maisa last week in the shuls that opened Parshas Bamidbar. They had to address this Maharam Mintz, because the Maharam Mintz is of the opinion that you can't lay in Parshas B'chukosai with Parshas Bamidbar. Those are the 2 chidushim of the Maram Mintz. Do we paskin like the Maram Mintz, or do we not? So if you take a look, the Magen Avram quotes the Maram Mintz lahalacha. The Shar Ephraim, Ephraim Zalman Margolios, and Shar Zayin also quotes the Maram Mintz. However, Gdolei Achronim, many Achronim, the lion's share of Achronim, argue with the Chiddush of the Maram Mintz, including the Maram Chik in a Tshuva, including the Mishnah Brura, and including the Aruch HaShulchan, all say, where do these svaras come from? What does that mean? You don't ever find that you read 3 Parshios. It's true. But if there ever is a reason to lay 3 Parshios, you should. It's true. Typically, we read a double Parsha. Bahar B'chukosai, Vayakel Pekudei. But those are only in situations that the Torah calls for us to read a double parsha. But if you ever missed multiple parshas, or if you missed all of Sefer Vayikra like we have, who says that you can't read all of Sefer Vayikra? And therefore the Aruch HaShulchan, as well as the Maram Shik, understand, like the Or Zarua, that you have to read everything. That's the opinion of the Aruch HaShulchan, that's the opinion of the Mishnah Brura, and that's the opinion of the Maram Shik, arguing on the Maram Mintz, although Maram Mintz is quoted, as I mentioned, by the Shar Ephraim as well as by the Magen Avram. The second Chiddush of the Maram Mintz, that you never find that you could connect the end of a Sefer to the beginning of the Sefer, Aruch HaShulchan, Maram Shik, and Mishnah Brura also argue. They said, who said? What's the svara? What's the basis? What's the logic? If you're required to do that, you're required to do that. And therefore, the Mishnah Brura posits not to paskin like the Maram Mintz, and it emerges that the Mishnah Brura keeps consistent with the Vilna Gaon. Because if you missed Parshas Vayechi, you'll lay next week Parshas Shmos, and that's Tashlumim. You're not going to only read Parshas Shmos. If Kriyas HaTorah is patterned after Tefillah, if you miss Parshas Vayechi, so next week Parshas Shmos will be read, as long with Parshas Vayechi. And the same thing is true if you miss a double parsha. The Mishnah Brura seemingly understands that you don't look at it as 2 independent parshas, you look at it as one large parsha. Bahar B'chukosai is one parsha, and the tashlumim for parshas Bahar B'chukosai will be made up along with Parshas Bamidbar. Therefore, it seems that the position of the Maram Mintz, according to the lion's share of Achronim, even though Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolios and the Magen Avram quote it, because the Mishnah Brura, the Aruch HaShulchan, and the Maram Shik, as well as many other Achronim, including the Eliyah Rabbah, argue on the tshuva of the Maram Mintz. Therefore, that seems to be the psak halacha, not to follow the opinion of Maram Mintz, and therefore you will lane Parshas Bahar B'chukosai along with Parshas Bamidbar. You will lane Parshas Vayikra along with Parshas Vayakel Pekudei if need be, and if the situation calls for. And as I mentioned last week, when Shuls did open up, this was a question that needed to be addressed. But at the crux of the core of the issue, again it emerges that the Maharam Mintz is arguing with the basic logic of the Or Zarua. The Or Zarua understands that you have to finish everything. You can never come to Simchas Torah missing any parsha. Maramin says, who says? Why is that true? If it's a difficulty, like the Zera Emes says in his tshuva, and it's going to cause a tircha to tzibura, it's going to cause an unlong process and an elongation of the davening kriyas Torah, you shouldn't have to make it up. And therefore, according to the Maramintz, we're never going to put ourselves in a situation to read multiple Parshios or to read from Parsha to Parsha, as opposed to the opinion of Aruch HaShulchan, the Maram Shik, and the Mishnah Berurah. We want to finish the Parshios as long as we are able to do that. Thus, so far we have the opinion of the Or Zarua, who says you have to make up all of the Parshios. We have the opinion of the Vilna Gaon that you only make up the previous week's Parsha, along with the Maramintz, who also says that you only make up the previous week's Parsha, and there are two exceptions in the world of the Maramintz. You never read 3 Parshios, it's a double Parsha along with the present Parsha, or vice versa. If the present Parsha is a double, you're not going to make up the previous because you're not going to read 3 weeks, and you're not going to ever make up when you go from Chumash to Chumash, Bahar B'chukosai to Bamidbar. But there's a third opinion in the poskim, and it's an important opinion of the Shari Ephraim. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius, the outstanding Rav of the city of Brod, who is a very, very prolific author in one of those most important works, the Shari Ephraim, is Sefer on Hilchos Kriyas Torah, which the Mishnah Berurah quotes regularly, says lahalacha a third approach to our Shaila. And in Shar Zayin Simila Metes, the Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius writes as follows. Vimlo bitlu ba'ones. If the Layning in Shul didn't get cancelled because of extenuating circumstances, rak shlohayasham asar b'Shabbos. Let's say you never had a minyan. 8 people came, 9 people came to Shul on Shabbos, and a minyan was not able to be met. A quorum wasn't reached. Ein tzarech lahashlim b'Shabbos haba. Says Rav Chaim Zalman Margolius, you don't have to make up the Layning the next week. And in his Pischei Sharim, the commentary of Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius on his work Shari Ephraim, he explains, Kain nira li'alastaiti. Didafka hecha de b'nei chiyuvahim. Only when there's a minyan that met, and their b'nei chiyuva, there's a requirement to lane. Ela shir lem ones, but an extenuating circumstance occurred. But when there were never 10 people that actually met in the shul, there was never a requirement that Tzibur never had a chiyuv of Kriyas Torah, and they don't have to make it up. Says Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius, there's only a requirement to lane when there are 10 people that were there. And then an onus came, like the case of the Or Zarua, like the case of the Maramintz. They were mivatal Kriyas Torah in the middle, or they were mivatal it before it started, but there were 10 people, there was a chiyuv that was chal on the tzibur. But if the tzibur was never in shul, there's never a chovas kriyas Torah in the tzibur, and you don't have to make up anything. Therefore, according to Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius, since we were never in shul, there was never a chiyuv on the tzibur. When you get back to shul and the shul does reopen, all you have to lane is that week's parsha. So whenever we're going to get back to shul, according to Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius in the Shari Ephraim Shar Zayin Simel Lametes, the only thing that you're going to have to lane is that week's parsha. So therefore, what emerges from the sugya of tashlumin for Kriyas Torah is 3 basic shitas. There's the shita of the Or Zarua, which is paskin like in the Aruch HaShulchan and the Maram Shik, that you need to lane all the Parshios of Kriyas Torah of the year. And from Parshios to Zos HaBracha comes Simchas Torah. You make sure that all 54 Parshios are read. That's a requirement. That's a takan of Moshe Rabbeinu, that the entire Chamisha Chumshei Torah must be read. And come what may, if you missed 5, 10, 15, or 20, whatever the case is, when you get back to shul, you got to make up all the Parshios. The Vilna Gaon argues fundamentally and categorically on the Or Zarua. He says, Lahadam, it's not true. Tashlumin for Kriyas Torah is patterned after Tashlumin for Tefillah. And as many Tefillos as you missed, you're only going to make up the last one. So if you get to shul from Mariv and you missed Mincha, Shachris, the previous Mincha, Shachris, you're only going to make up the previous Tefillah. The same thing is true in Kriyas Torah. If you missed 5, 10, 15, 20 Parshas, you get back to shul, you're going to read the last week's Parsha and this week's Parsha. According to the Shari Ephraim Zalman Margolis, the most lenient position, the only time you're going to make up is if you were in shul, there was a chova on the tzibur that was chal, and then it was nisvatel kriyas haTorah, then you have to make it up. If an ones, an extenuating circumstance came along. But if the shul never met and there never was a quorum, you don't have to do anything altogether. Therefore, when we get back to shul, according to the Shari Ephraim, you don't have to read any previous sedras. All you have to read is that week's parsha. Halach l'maisa, what do we do? You may have seen in the handouts that I gave, there were three basic shitos that I found contemporarily as to what poskim say. The first was the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, the son of Rabbi Vaja, and like his father classically did, counting up basically the shitos and the Rishonim and the Achronim, he comes to the mathematical conclusion that most follow the opinion of the Or Zarua. Therefore, the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef, paskins that when we get back to shul, wherever you may be, you have to make up all the Parshios. If you finished Parshas Kisisa, if that's what you got up to, you start there, and you come to shul, you're going to read not one, not two, but 15, 16, 7, whatever amount of Parshios that you missed, that's what has to be made up, based upon the opinion of the Azura, that's the Psak Aruch HaShulchan, the Maram Shik, and many, many other poskim that he quotes. Take a look in his tshuva. There's a second position, the opinion of Rabbi Weiss. Rabbi Weiss in his tshuva seems to paskin that you could rely on Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius, and all you have to do is to read that week's parsha. He says that coupled with the fact that today, contemporarily, in the coronavirus world that we're living in, the more exposure that we have to each other, the more dangerous it is, and therefore Abashir wants to limit the amount of time that we're in shul. Kriyas HaTorah takes too long, and if we're going to start making up 5, 10, 15 parshios, we're going to be in shul too long, and therefore he takes the most lenient position, best just to come to shul, quick davening, lay that week's parsha, and move on, like the Shari Ephraim, like Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis. Rabbi Hershel Shechter seems to have a middle approach. Lechatchila, he says, if it's possible, you shall learn all the parshios, like the Or Zarua, like the simple understanding of the Or Zarua. However, there's much to be lenient, he says. You could base the leniency upon the Vilna Gaon. You only have to make tashlumim for the previous week's parsha, and you could rely on Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolis as well, that all you have to do is that week's parsha. But lechatchila, if it's feasible, it's possible, do like the Or Zarua, and like the Aruch HaShulchan, like the Maram Shik, and laying all the parshios of the Remest. What are we going to do? Seems to me that the basic psak halacha would follow the Ramah and the Gra's understanding, which would mean that all we will have to do is to lay that week's parsha along with tashlumim of the previous week. That's the pasha pshat in the Gra, the way he understands the Ramah. It seems to me that many shuls that are opening, that is what they are doing. Although Rabbi Weiss says you don't rely on the Shari Ephraim, certainly there's plenty of room to do that. And although Rabbi Yitzchak Yosef says that you should read all the Parshios, the Pasha Pshat in the Ramah, based upon the understanding of the Vilna Gaon, is that all you have to do is to read that week's Parsha, since Kriyas HaTorah and Tashlumin for Kriyas HaTorah is patterned after Tashlumin for Tefillah, all you would have to do is to read the previous week's Parsha. That is what I would like to do. That's what we are going to implement. Now, we could argue that if you have multiple minyanim, if there are 10 people who want to make up all of the Parshios, maybe that's something to entertain, but you do have to take into account Rabbi Weiss's excellent point that the longer exposure that there is, the more dangerous that is, so we will have to take that into account. But I think according to the letter of the law, the Pasha Pshat, the Halacha L'maisa, it would be to follow the Psak of the Vilna Gaon, his understanding of the Ramah, to only read that week's Parsha and be mashlim the previous week's Parsha. Just to conclude, everything that we're discussing is all when it comes to Bittul Kriyas HaTorah B'tzibur. This is all when an entire community, a kahal, a shul missed Layning. What about if one person misses a parsha? It often happens you're traveling from America to Eretz Yisrael or vice versa and you're off a week. Is there a requirement for a yachid, for an individual, to make up the Kriyas HaTorah that he may have missed? This is subject to great debate, and of course it predicates upon whether or not Kriyas HaTorah is a chovas hatzibur or a chovas hayachid. Is Kriyas HaTorah something that I as an individual am obligated in, or no, it's an obligation upon the tzibur? If it's an obligation on the tzibur read Kriyas HaTorah, I missed it, I don't have to make it up. But if Kriyas HaTorah is an obligation on the yachid, I have to go to the earth's end to make sure to make it up. There are multiple stories of Gedolei Yisrael. Moshe Feinstein, for example, missed Parshas Bahar B'Chukosai one year. He was in the hospital, and when he came back, he asked to make up Parshas Bahar B'Chukosai along with Bamidbar. Now, by the way, that Meiser Rav tells us a lot. Number one, he wasn't makbid for the Maramintz, and on two accounts, he laned three Parshios, Bahar B'Chukosai and Bamidbar. He went from Bahar B'Chukosai, which is at the end of Vayikra, to the beginning of the Bamidbar, also not like the Maharamintz, and also as a Yachid, he held that he had to make up Kriyas HaTorah even though he was a Yachid. The same story is told about the Chazon Ish, who also missed 2 weeks of Kriyas HaTorah. He was in the hospital, and he again also asked to make up the previous 2 weeks that he missed. Same thing is true. There's a story in the Meiser Rav, the Vilna Gaon was jailed for 4 weeks, and also upon returning to Shul, he also asked to make up those 4 weeks Parshios. In that very same Tshuva, the Maram Shik, he quotes his Rebbe, the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer quotes from his Rebbe, the Haflar, as well as Reb Nassan Adler, who also missed Kriyas HaTorah for several weeks, and they as well asked to make up Parshios that they missed as well. Each of these Gedolim, Moshe Feinstein, the Chazon Ish, the Gra, the Maram Shik, quoting Reb Nassan Adler and the Hafla, held that it was a Chovas HaYachid. But there's no question that it seems, the Psak in the Shulchan Aruch, which seems to emerge, is that Kriyas HaTorah is indeed a Chovas HaTzibur. If it's a Chovas HaTzibur, you don't have to make it up. These Gedolim were Machmir. The Chazon Ish even writes somewhere that he was Machmir. He held Mi'ikar Adin that Kriyas HaTorah is a Chovas HaTzibur, but he was Machmir, and that seems to be what he did. That's what Rav Moshe did. That's what the Maram Shik, quoting the Chassam Sofer and his Rabbeim, did, and that is what these Gedolim did. Although the halacha, it is a chovas hatzibur, it's an obligation upon the community and not on the yachid. Our case, which we are discussing, is when an entire tzibur, an entire community misses Kriyas HaTorah. Is there a chiyuv to make it up or not? And as we have seen, these are the three basic shitas, the Orzarua, the Vilna Gaon, and the Shari Ephraim. The Orzarua, the most machmir shita to make up all of the Parshios. The Shari Ephraim, the most mekel shita, you don't have to make up any. The Vilna Gaon, the middle shita, like Tashlumim for Tefillah, you make up the previous week's Parsha. That's all you have to do. And as I said, what we will attempt to do, Be'ezrat Hashem, as we get closer to the reopening of Woodside Synagogue Avos Torah B'Siyata D'Shmaya, that we will go like the Vilna Gaon to read the previous week's Parsha and the current Parsha. Kadosh Baruch Hu should allow us and help us to open up our shuls B'Karav Mamish and B'Siyata D'Shmaya to be able to get back to Kriyas HaTorah. B'Karav, wishing everybody a wonderful week, a good Tavach, and only good things. Yeshuas v'nechamos to all of Klal Yisrael.